Welcome to the new PHP-based rendering of the Type 3 documentation. And I'm Lina Wolf, and this little white fluff ball here is my dog Benny. His last name is not Mac, and he ends on a Y, not on an E. I. And one very good thing about the new PHP-based rendering is that it's much faster. So this year, when I was helping with the core onboarding, I did a live demonstration of locally rendering the changelog, and I wouldn't have dared doing that last year. Last year on a local machine, it took about between half an hour and an hour to once render the complete changelog of tab 3. It's several thousand pages. And this year we were able to do it in 5 minutes. So it's still not as comfortable as we would like to have it, but it's really, you can write a changelog entry, trigger the rendering, have a cigarette break, and then have a look at the result. So that's possible now. And smaller documentation really renders lightning fast. Like here we have 56 seconds on the GitHub workflow. So that's really fast, and that's a good thing. Because it also enables you to check your own work much faster. And my team colleague Gavin, he even made a live rendering where the REST files are watched, and whenever a REST file is changed, then the rendering is triggered, and you can have a look at what you're doing almost live. Another good news is it was always quite complicated to do links between different manuals. You had to know a lot about it, read the documentation. And of course, we know no one of us likes reading documentation, especially not documentation about how to document something. And now we just make this nice little button beside a headline. Whenever you hover the headline, you can see the button. And when you click on the button, you can get these links, and you can copy yourself the REST syntax that you need for linking. And you can also, of course, copy a permalink or HTML link. And you do not have to register manuals that you want to link anymore like we used to. But you can link to any documentation that's on our docs type 3 org. You can link to any documentation of any extension just by using the composer name as a key. And for any internal manual from the Type 3 documentation team, you can also use a short name. And the short name will appear in this pop-up, so you don't even have to remember it or something like that. So I think this is a really cool new feature for linking things. Then we have a very new feature, which is a little bit buggy because I just started working on it like a week ago. And whenever you mention a fully qualified name in your documentation, and this fully qualified class name is within the Type 3 core, then by hovering that class, you can get information about the class just like you would have in your IDE, like the short description from the comments, and information about if it's read-only or final or whatever. And when you click on the link, you will go to api.typo3.org to the class definition. And on api.typo3.org, which we also exchanged and made new with new technology, you will find a GitHub link, which links you to the code. And if you click this button beside a method, it will link you to the code and to the exact line number. So that when you don't have your IDE with you, you can still have a look at the implementation of a method or something like that. if you would want that. And all you need to do when you are writing your documentation is using this rule double point PHP double point, and then in backticks the fully qualified name. Usually you should start the fully qualified name with a backslash, but we are also detecting when the backslash is missing, like is in this example here, and then we can still resolve the fully qualified class name if we find it in the core. And we are already working together with guys from Doctrine. They want to implement the same system. So soon we can also link to Doctrine classes. We are talking with Symfony about this. Soon we might also be able to link to Symfony classes. And we are working on a reverse system where when you are looking at api.typo3.org, you can find any place in the documentation that mentions this class, including changelog entries. So if I would now go on the connection pool, this isn't finished yet, but we have ideas on how to implement. If you would now go on api.typo3.org on the connection pool, you would be able to find any changelog entry which mentions this fully qualified name. And so this would also be helpful. Also, we are automatically linking to the preferred Typo3 version, which you are able to configure in your settings. So when your extension is compatible with Typo3 12, you can always link to Typo3 12 and not to the current main version, which might not contain the class anymore. And migration to the new PHP-based rendering for extension authors that have documentation is really easy. And if you still don't want to do it, then we will soon turn off the old rendering sometime in fall. And then all extensions that are changed will be migrated on the fly and will just be rendered in the new rendering. But then, of course, it's better you do this yourself, because then you have some control when something doesn't display correctly or there are warnings. So you have control. But if you don't want to do it, we will just turn off the old rendering and will render you in the new documentation. And Sandra will do a live demo of migrating a real extension, the documentation. It's very easy, but she will also show you how it's going. So I think I don't have to explain to you now. The settings, all settings that are important are always in a file called documentation/guides.xml now. And you can find documentation about this on the docs how to document page. And you can use Docker or Podman to render the documentation. Theoretically, since it's just PHP, you could also just check out our repository and use it yourself. But the Docker container is usually easy and nice to use. Unless you're trying to do development or exchange the theme yourself, you can, of course, also do things like that. So doing the local rendering is fast and it's easy. It's just a Docker command or Podman command if you prefer. And since getting your documentation displayed on docs.typo3.org works just like it worked before, with a webhook that you can register on GitHub or Bitbucket or GitLab Cloud, and this workflow just works like before. And for the time being, if there is a guides.xml in your documentation folder, then the new rendering is used, and if there is none, the old rendering is used. But this will change sometime in fall this year. And it's also now possible to activate automatic testing of your documentation in your project. And we recommend you doing this because you will get warning when something breaks. For example, when you mention an extension and the extension doesn't exist anymore for some reason, or their documentation is not rendered, whatever, you can get a warning. Or you can get a warning if you made a problem with a list styling that would break your page. Then you can get a warning, and you have the chance to fix this before someone mentions that your documentation is broken. And I know this doesn't fit the time of the year, but it's always hard to teach an old dog new tricks. But still, we did. One new cool feature that I really like is when you are searching, you can now decide to just search in the one manual where you are currently in. So I can search for something like routing in the news extension manual and ignore all the other results that I have. Another really nice feature is the report issue button. You can also configure whether you want it or not. And using this button, people can report an issue, and the issue will automatically contain the URL where the error was found. And so you can get a better bug reporting about the documentation from your readers. And you can also, just like before, you can configure the edit on GitHub button, etc. It's all in the configuration file called guides.xml. We really improved the handling of files, because sometimes it makes sense to have a lot of information on one page. For example, in the references, we will have all related properties on one page. But editing such large pages, especially using the edit on GitHub workflow, is not so easy. So now we are possible to split up the documentation into files, include these files, and then have, you can see it here on the top right, you have a button where you can edit on GitHub just the one include file and not all of it. And also we put code snippet in separate files now, and you are able to click the edit on GitHub button just for this one file snippet. And when you edit the file snippet, it's a real PHP file, which will give you all the syntax highlighting and support of PHP code. And the code snippet is linted, and the code snippet is passed through the coding guidelines. So that's a real improvement for quality of code snippets in the documentation. As you can see here, this would be such a code snippet. This would be such an include file, which is included, and which in turn returns an include, which is a code snippet. That's the literal include directive that you can use in REST together with a pass on where the code file is, and it's a real PHP file. Okay, here's a screenshot of the real PHP file that you could also edit on GitHub and go there directly to edit it. So if you have more questions, of course, you can ask us here, and you can also find us on Slack. And you can, of course, always open issues in our repositories if you find an issue. And yeah, thanks for everyone who was involved in making this possible. And now I hand over to the live demonstration to Sandra.
Thank you. Just wait. Yes. Now I start with the live demo, and I selected the extension from Georg Ringer, Event News. First, I will tell you something about me. I am in the Typo 3 community for 2.5 years now, so new, I guess. And I came from physics, and in the documentation team, I'm involved for 5 months. And also I am in the organization team for the Camp Rhein-Ruhr. And also I'm in the education committee in the editor team. And this is a picture about me with sunflowers. Yeah. And migration is really easy also for me because I'm a newcomer and I didn't know about anything. So I will show you how it is done. The first thing we will do is we migrate the settings CFG, which is the old settings file, to the guides XML. And for this, we only need this command. And then it will transfer it into the other file. You see on the left the settings CFG, how it looked before. And on the right, you see the guides XML. Maybe you can see it, but I will show you in a minute. So let's start. Um, so let's say we already created a fork, because normally as a documentation team, you have no access to the repository. So I created a fork. This is just a copy from the repository, from the original repository. And I also created a branch, which is called task rendering. And I also prepared, it's a bit difficult because I cannot. Mm, okay, thank you. I need the code snippets because I don't want to type everything. So this is just the first command that I showed you before. And I will just paste it here and be sure that Docker is on. Yes, later I will show a QR code and there you can just go there and start. Okay, then we see, I don't know, do you can see it or should I zoom in? Maybe I zoom in. Yes?
Maybe you can use there's usually a demonstration mode for, yeah, it also works like this.
Here you see that we have converted 11 settings. And when my mouse is not working. And when you then go to the documentation folder where your REST files are located, then you see here is a new file, guides XML, popped up. It's really difficult to switch. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah. Sorry. Maybe I should. Is it easier like this for you then? No, I didn't. Okay. What we recommend is to reformulate reformate the code so that you can easily read it. And for every attribute, we use one line. Maybe it's a little bit boring. Okay. So this is the guides XML now. Later we will do a manual change here. But at first, I would suggest we clean up the old files. So we delete the old files. And I present you this slide here, which files we can safely delete. The first one is clear. It is the settings CFG. The next one is genindex. We do not use this file for now, but maybe we proceed and get a new feature. And for that, you should keep the index directives for now. And because we delete the gen index rest, we can also delete the line in the index rest file. And then the next we can delete includes rest txt, or just empty it and leave a comment. And when you want to display a sentence everywhere in your documentation, you can place this sentence in this file. Wait.
For example, we use this feature in the official documentation to make warnings on top of outdated documentation that's just for an ELTS version. You could also use it as a feature to display a message that you are abandoning your project or moving it to another composer name or whatever.
Okay, thank you. So I switch again to the project. When it works? It is there, but I cannot see it. Why I cannot see it? Okay. Can you help me?
I don't know about the Mac. Anyone knows about the Mac here?
Okay, it worked now. Okay, I can switch now. I can see now something. So we do now, we delete the file CFG. In index rest, we delete the line, delete the line gen index, but I see now here is no gen index file. Maybe you cannot see it again. And in this file, I said that we could empty it, so I empty it. Yeah. Yes. Sorry, I'm a little bit confused. So here, this is the file index rest txt. There we have to delete everything, and we can leave a comment. Fixed text, I just say. Okay. Now we have delete everything and cleaned up. And the next step is we have to change or set the name, which already was told, from the composer JSON. So we go to the composer JSON, copy it, Sorry. Sorry, I am a little bit upset. So I cannot think. Okay. I just copy here the interlink shortcode and include this name into it. Now we are finished with the guides XML. And now, before we could also render locally, but now we render locally. So this is, we create a folder which is called generated temp. And in this folder, we put all REST generated HTML files from the REST code. So here is the code. I show you later in a big slide. So I just perform this. And we see, okay, there were 7 files successfully rendered. That's cool. Now the normal procedure is to look at the old documentation and compare it with the new one. So I will do it now. Here you see the old documentation. And the new documentation I open when I go to the index HTML file in the new generated folder. Then in PHP Storm, the button appears with the web browsers, so we can open it from there. So here we have both documentations. And normally you go through and look if there's everything okay and or something unexpected. Something is not working with my mouse. Okay. Yes, so just look and go through, but we have now not time to go through everything. So I want that you pay attention to this line. Here's an error found. It says section of contents directive not found in this file, users manual index rest. Okay. So for example, we can check in the documentation if on this file we see something. So we have to go to user manuals and look if we see a difference. And yes, we see a difference. Here are links and here are no links. Okay. So maybe we look in the code. It is where this sentence were placed. So we go into this file and look into the respective REST file. It was in user manual index. It is this sentence, it is here. And then we see, okay, the only HTML is deprecated. Okay, therefore we delete it and keep the right indentations. And now we can check if the error disappeared when we just perform the same command, like generating a directory and performing the Docker command that I will show you later on a slide. And then we see the error is gone. Okay, perfect. So this is also a good thing that you can see right now that you have an error. But not everything is now supported. For example, when you have a link and you forgot to make a backtick, then it is not shown. But maybe we will provide it later. Okay. Now the next step that we recommend is to create a GitHub action. And for this, I already created this code. And in general, it performs the same command, but when you have an error, then you cannot push to it. So it gets then in GitHub red. So yeah. So I will create now the folder. In GitHub, I create workflows. And then the file, it's a YAML file, test documentation. Uh, Here's the code. No, here is the command that I just performed. And yeah, be sure that after the slashes, there is no space. That's important. Otherwise, you get errors. Okay. And the other thing that we recommend is that you create a makefile. This is good in order to not perform these long commands again and again. So let's create a makefile that then you can just write in your shell make docs and your documentation is rendered locally. And then you get this, this folder with all HTML files. For example, here, here is the code for that I also performed. And when you then put on your shell make and then docs, then it will be rendered locally. Here it is also very important that in front of the commands you do not have spaces, but tabs. Otherwise you will get an error. And for this issue, we also recommend you that you add in the editor config settings in your PHP storm this setting. It is just that an intent step is not a space, but a tab. I hope you understand something. So this is the editor config, and I just paste these lines. Perfect. Okay, now, as I said, make docs should now perform the same as before. So I now do make docs. And this is performed, these two commands. Again, successfully placed 7 rendered HTML files. Okay, great. Yes, and this was all. Now we can commit it. We use in our company tower, and then just, yeah, stage what we want or not want. Normally we would do not include the documentation generated file. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Can you
Why is the rendered HTML documentation in general not included in the extension? Is that just a rule in type-of-free community, or is there some meaning behind this?
you want to answer or?
It's not included because it would take up space that is kind of unnecessary because it's just a repetition of the information that's already there. But of course, if you decide in your extension that you want to do that, you can do it. That's not that we are saying you shouldn't do it, but usually people don't include the rendered version of their documentation.
Okay. Yeah, for me, when you ask me which commands are the most important commands, then I would say these two. The first one is to get the guides XML, and the other one is to render the files locally, the HTML files. And there's only this small difference, just to highlight it. Yes, then when you have now an extension, then you can just migrate it. Just go to this link and it directs you to the documentation where everything is nicely step by step explained what you should do. Yeah, and when you have problems, then just ask us. And yeah, I just thank you for your attention.
Any questions? If I want to start a new extension and start with the rendering, do I have some template guide XML file, or should I take it from any other extension and modify it? So what's the recommended way?
We have an example guides XML in the documentation where you can just copy the code. And we also have examples for certain settings if you want to make them additionally. And there is an example, we have a repository with example documentation where you can see all the files and where they're placed. And that you also find in the documentation of how to document, the guide on how to contribute to the documentation. And we are right now considering to make a new docker command with which you can generate basic documentation if you don't have it yet, but we are still working on this.
Sorry, not a question itself, but just to add to that, there's also the migration tool, which is able to configure settings and part of settings initially with a Docker command. So you can use that also to create an empty XML file. And you can programmatically set attributes like setting the title and setting the version and whatever through a Docker command. So you don't have to really need to edit the XML file itself if you don't want to. You should. If not, it's a bug and you can file it and I'll happily address it.
All right. Any more questions?
You said that you're working on a generation command. In which repository do you it, or is it better question, is it public? At your type of free documentation space. In the type of free documentation space. Yeah. Ah, okay.
So our theme, our tapestry documentation theme, and the Docker commands, etc., can be found on GitHub in the tapestry documentation repository organization, and the project is called Render Guides. And the project itself to render the REST files with PHP is also open source. It's made by it's hosted, it's on GitHub organization of PHP Documenter. And they are actually the guys who invented the PHP doc comments, starting with / that we are all using today. So it's also a very old open source PHP documentation project. And that is also open source, and you can also have a look on GitHub, and welcome to contribute or report issues. And also other PHP open source projects are now, they have supported us in our quest to switch our documentation, and are now planning to switch themselves. The next project that we would like to switch would be Doctrine. And we are already working on that and making a plan to switch their documentation to the new PHP-based rendering. Yes. Any other questions? Okay, then thank you everyone for coming, and happy documenting.